The first blow didn't hurt. Not at first. What Alara Quinn felt was impact bone and shock, followed by the sickening pause, where the body hasn't yet decided whether to scream. Her knees buckled, groceries spilling out of her arms and bouncing across the sun-bleached street of White Mesa. A jar of beans burst open when it hit the packed dirt, splattering her skirt in a slow ooze of brown. The world spun. Heat shimmered up from the ground. Someone laughed. Then the second blow came, and her breath tore out of her. Boots scuffed and shifted around her like circling vultures. White Mesa's empty main street, the saloon, the livery stable. The shuttered boarding house blurred through the dust. Her fall kicked up. Midday sun hammered down on her neck, and for a heartbeat she wondered if this was how she died, at high noon, in a place where no one would even bother to say her name. Cole Maddox's voice cut through everything. "Thought you were clever, huh? Thought you could steal from me and just walk out?" Alara forced herself upright onto her hands. Blood from her split lip dripped onto the dirt and mixed with the spilled beans. "I didn't steal anything." Her voice rasped like dry paper. "You know damn well." The toe of Cole's boot caught her cheek and sent her sprawling again. Fire raked down the side of her face. She tasted iron. Behind him, Royce Devereaux chuckled, his laugh thin and high. "She's still talkin'. Cole might want to fix that." The crowd, or what passed for one, watched from the boardwalks. A woman with a parasol pretended to read a newspaper. Two old-timers leaned against a hitching post, murmuring about trouble but making no move to stop it. Mateo Salazar stood frozen near the livery doors, jaw clenched, hands fisted at his sides. He looked like he wanted to step forward. He didn't. Cowards, all of them. Cowards wrapped in daylight. Cole reached down, grabbed a handful of Alara's hair, and yanked her head up until she was forced to look at him. His breath smelled of whiskey and rotting pride. "You think anybody's gonna stand up for you?" he asked softly to softly. "You're no one. A laundress with no husband, no family." "No." Alara spat blood at his boots. "Better no family than yours." The fist came fast. She didn't see it, only felt the snap of her head back and the white-hot bloom behind her eyes. Pain swam through her skull. Her body wavered like a flag in wind. Someone muttered, "Enough, Cole," but no one stopped him. Of course they didn't. Why would they? It was easier to let a useless woman get ground into the dust than to piss off the Maddox family. They owned half of White Mesa, its money, its law, its silence. Cole let go of her hair and let her fall. She didn't catch herself this time. Her cheek slammed into the dirt. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't understand how she'd fallen so far in such a short life. A third kick landed in her ribs. Something cracked a deep, wet sound inside her body. She curled in on herself, arms drawn up to shield her chest, but they still hit her. Royce's boot caught her shoulder. Jeb Crowley's heel drove into her thigh. A tear slipped down her cheek, not from pain, from rage. Through the ringing in her ears, she caught snatches of voices, casual, bored, turning away. She shouldn't run her mouth. Maddox boys never needed much excuse. Sheriff will wander out when he's good and ready. A boot dug into her spine and held. Cole leaned over her, voice thick with triumph. "Now you're gonna learn what happens when you embarrass me." Something broke inside her, then something separate from bone. A quiet, bitter realization. I guess it's easier to watch a woman die than to risk pissing off a Maddox. Her vision dimmed at the edges. The world narrowed to hot sand, stomping boots, and her own ragged breath. She pressed her forehead into the dirt, whispering, "Please, stop," though she hated herself for begging. A heavy silence fell. Then she heard hoof beats, slow, steady, purposeful. The rhythm cut through her haze, different from the panic-sharp shuffle of the crowd. A shadow blocked the sun. The air changed, as if someone large had stepped between her and the sky. A low voice said, "What the hell is going on here?" Cole straightened. "None of your business, stranger." The stranger didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, boots stopping inches from Alara's face. She blinked up, vision blurry, trying to see him. All she caught was a dark silhouette, broad shoulders, a long coat dusted red from the trail, and eyes, storm cloud eyes, fixed on the men standing over her. "Back away from the woman," he said. "Calm, deadly calm." Royce snorted. "Or what?" The stranger finally moved. Not fast, just certain. He reached down, grabbed Cole by the back of his shirt, and yanked him away from Alara like dragging garbage off a doorstep. Cole stumbled, furious. "You got a death wish." The stranger put a hand on his Colt, didn't draw. "Just rested there. Not today. But keep giving me reasons." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Even Royce and Jeb hesitated, reading something in the man's posture, something cold and practiced. Sheriff McAllister finally lumbered out of his office, head askew. All right, that's enough." But the sheriff didn't look at Cole. He looked at the stranger, like he was the real problem. The stranger ignored both of them. He knelt beside Alara, and the whole world dimmed except for that small, steady presence. "Can you hear me?" he asked. Alara swallowed blood. "Yes, you're hurt." She managed a cracked laugh. "What gave it away?" He slipped an arm beneath her back, lifting her gently, too gently for a man built like that, and she bit back a cry. Her ribs screamed. Her breath shook. "You're all right," he murmured. "I've got you." "No," she whispered. "Nobody's got me. You're wrong." He stood with her in his arms, rising as if she weighed nothing. The crowd watched, silent now, awed despite themselves. Cole's face turned purple with rage. The stranger looked down at her, voice low but carved from steel. "You're not staying down here in their dirt. You'll stand with me, one way or another." Somewhere deep inside her, a spark flared, hope or disbelief. She wasn't sure. Cole spat. "This ain't over. You just made enemies you can't afford." The stranger didn't even glance at him. He shifted Alara's weight, turned toward the doctor's building, and said over his shoulder, "I've had worse enemies. They're all gone now." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd at that. Alara's vision tunneled again. She clung to consciousness, focusing on his heartbeat against her ear, steady and impossibly calm. He kicked open the doctor's door. "Doc, I need you." Inside was cooler, dimmer. She felt herself being lowered onto a table, heard the doctor curse under his breath. The stranger hovered beside her, shadow steady over her. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Why? Why did you help me?" He met her eyes, and in them she saw not pity but something far heavier. "Because once," he said softly, "I rode past someone who needed help. By the time I came back, it was too late." The words drifted into the dark with her, as consciousness slipped away completely. One last thought burned through Alara's fading mind. "Whoever this man is, he didn't ride past me." Outside, the murmurs of the frightened town rose. Inside, the stranger's shadow stayed unmoving beside her, an anchor in a place where no one else had ever stood for her. And somewhere beyond the far ridge, unseen by all of them, a different shadow watched the smoke rising from White Mesa and turned its horse toward the basin. The danger in her life had only just begun. Alara surfaced to consciousness like a diver rising through black water, slow, disoriented, every movement thick with pain. Brightness stabbed at her eyelids, forcing them shut again. The smell reached her first: carbolic acid, old wood, and something faintly metallic. A doctor's room. She knew that scent from washing aprons. A shadow moved beside her. "You're awake," the man said, the same voice, deep and steady. The voice she remembered from the dust, the one that pulled her out of hell. She blinked until the world sharpened. Rhett Callahan. She didn't know his name yet, but everything about him seemed carved from stone. Sat in the lone wooden chair next to her cot, hat in his lap, head bowed slightly, boots planted like he'd been rooted there for hours. She swallowed, throat raw. Did they follow us?" "No," he said. For now. The words sat heavy between them. She attempted to sit. Pain shot through her ribs like a hot blade. A choked sound escaped her before she could stifle it. He moved instantly, one hand steadying her back without pressing too hard. "Easy," Doc said. "Her ribs are cracked, shoulders bruised, lips split, concussions mild but real. You move too fast. You'll pass out on the floor, and I'm not letting you hit dirt twice in the same day." His calm tone had an edge of iron, like a rancher soothing a wild horse that had been beat too long. Alara forced herself upright anyway, leaning on her elbows. "I need to go." "I can't stay." "You're not going anywhere." He spoke gently, but the finality in his voice made her go still. Her gaze darted around the room. Doc's office. She recognized the faded landscape painting on the wall, the old metal cabinet full of bandages. The window shutters were partly closed, letting in thin slivers of desert light. "You carried me here," she whispered. He nodded once. "Why?" He studied her for a long moment. "Because leaving you there wasn't an option." Footsteps in the hall interrupted them. Doc Hennigan pushed through the door, hair wild, apron stained. He gave Alara a quick once-over, then shot Rhett a tired glare. "You're still here," Doc muttered. Rhett didn't react. "Just mackin' sure she'll live," Doc snorted. "She'll live. Don't know about your odds, though." Alara tensed. "What odds?" Doc sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. "Cole Maddox ain't the forgiving type. You humiliated him in front of half the damn town. He's been stomping around like a kicked bull since you brought her in." Rhett's jaw flexed. "He touches her again, he'll lose more than pride." Doc shot him a warning look. "Killin' a Maddox starts a war you can't win, son. Already been in one," he replied. Didn't much care for how it ended. Doc's expression softened just slightly, as if he'd heard something in Rhett's tone that Alara didn't yet understand. But the doctor left without saying more, muttering about making poultices. Silence settled. Alara watched the stranger, this man who'd stepped into her nightmare, as if he'd been waiting for it. He wasn't handsome in a polished way, but there was something compelling in the hard lines of his face, the deep grooves at the corners of his eyes, the quiet danger in the way he held himself. A man used to violence, but not proud of it. "Who are you?" she asked softly. He hesitated only a breath. Rhett Callahan. The name echoed faintly in her memory. She'd heard it somewhere in whispers, maybe, from travelers passing through White Mesa. "You're a gunfighter?" she guessed. He huffed, almost amused. "Not exactly." "Then what?" Rhett stared at the floor, thumb brushing along the brim of his hat. When he finally spoke, the words came slow, like he was pulling them from a painful place. "I used to ride with the Rangers." Her breath hitched. The Texas Rangers were legends, part lawmen, part ghost story. Men who rode into hell and didn't always ride back out. "Used to." She pressed. He lifted his gaze. His eyes were the color of Thunderhead's gray, restless, full of storms that never fully cleared. "Until the wrong man decided I needed a lesson." She waited, heart thudding. "Silas Brigham," he said, voice low. "He and his men came for me after I put half of them behind bars. I wasn't home. My wife and children were." Cold washed over Alara. "Your family?" "Burned alive." His jaw clenched once, hard. "My neighbors tried to put it out. Too late. The house went down like a pyre. The room felt colder, the air heavier. I spent 2 years hunting Silas," he continued quietly. "Drove myself raw trying to find him. When I did, let's just say justice didn't pan out the way I wanted. He slipped past the law, and I slipped out of it." She swallowed hard. "So you're running?" "Was." He finally looked at her, fully steady, unapologetic. "Till today." A beat passed. "Two. You said something," Alara whispered. "When you picked me up. I think I heard it before I passed out." His face softened in a way she hadn't expected. "You probably heard a lot of things." "No." Her voice broke. "You said I wasn't staying in the dirt. You said I'd stand with you." A shadow crossed his expression, something like regret, something like resolve. Meant every word. Her chest tightened. Nobody had said anything like that to her. Not ever. He leaned back in the chair, exhaling. "Cole Maddox would have beaten you to death if I hadn't stepped in." Alara flinched. Rhett continued, voice rougher now, not angry at her, but at himself, at the world, at the memory clawing up from his past. "I rode past once," he said. "Thought someone else would do the right thing. By the time I came back, my wife and kids were gone." The confession hung in the room like smoke. He looked at her then, not pitying, not claiming, simply acknowledging her humanity in a way no one ever had. "I don't ride past anymore." Alara closed her eyes, fighting tears she didn't want him to see. In a town where men stepped over her body, this stranger had put everything on the line, without hesitation. A knock rattled the door. Sheriff McAllister barged in, thumbs hooked in his belt, eyes scanning the room with feigned authority. "Doc says she'll live," the sheriff announced. "Which means you, mister, need to get the hell out of town." Rhett didn't move, didn't flinch. McAllister puffed up. "Cole's ready to tear the place apart, looking for payback." Best you saddle up before things get worse. For who? Rhett asked casually. The sheriff bristled. You don't know the Maddoxes. No, Rhett said, voice mild. But I know men like M. Alara whispered, Sheriff. They'll kill me if he leaves. McAllister didn't look at her. Didn't even acknowledge the truth of her words. I can't protect you from every damn fight you pick. Her throat tightened. I didn't pick. Rhett stood. Slowly, deliberately, the sheriff shut up. I'm not leaving her here, Rhett said. Not while those boys breathe. McAllister swallowed. You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be my first one. Rhett settled his hat on his head. But leaving her behind would be. The sheriff muttered something about suicide and law's trouble and left, slamming the door. When the sound faded, Alara whispered, You don't owe me anything. I don't owe them anything. Either, he replied. She stared at him. What happens now? Rhett looked out the narrow window slats, watching the town outside, people pretending not to stare. Whispers spreading, tension coiling like a snake. In his eyes, Alara saw a decision hardening. The same decision he'd made when he stepped between her and Cole. The same decision that had driven him across deserts chasing ghosts. We're leaving, he said. At first light. You're coming with me. Her mouth parted. You don't even know me. He turned back to her. I know what happens here if you stay. Fear, shame, death or worse. And you. She whispered. What happens to you if you take me? He shrugged, a flicker of dark humor crossing his face. Cole Maddox's ego gets bruised. Sheriff grumbles. Maybe I get shot at breakfast. Nothing I haven't seen before. She almost smiled. Almost. Can you ride? He asked. Not far, she admitted. I'll get a wagon. His voice softened. You don't have to be strong today. Just alive. A tear slipped down her cheek, uninvited. She wiped it quickly, annoyed at herself. You saved me, she murmured. Rhett shook his head. I just picked you up. You're the one who's got to stand. Her chest ached for reasons that had nothing to do with cracked ribs. Outside, the sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched. Somewhere far off, a horse whinnied a restless, unsettled sound. Rhett adjusted his hat, preparing to leave. I'll get supplies. Pack your things. We leave before White Mesa wakes up meaner than it went to sleep. Before he could step out. Her voice stopped him. Rhett. He paused in the doorway. She held his gaze, fragile but fierce. Thank you. Something flickered in his eyes. A storm breaking. A man remembering he wasn't done fighting after all. Get some rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow's gonna be loud. Then he was gone. Alara lay back against the pillow, heart unsteady. Her ribs throbbed with each breath, but hope thin, trembling, impossible rose through the pain. She wasn't alone. Not tonight. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that in the far distance, beyond the ridge that framed White Mesa, a rider with a scar burned across his jaw was already turning his horse toward the town. Silas Brigham had heard whispers that Rhett Callahan was alive, and he was coming. Alara woke to the sound of someone arguing low, sharp, and controlled, like two men trying to keep from drawing guns. Her pulse spiked as she pushed herself upright on the cot, every muscle protesting. Morning light filtered through the doctor's shutters, slicing the room into bars of pale gold and shadow. The voices grew clearer. I said no. Rhett Callahan's voice ground out like gravel dragged across steel. She's not going anywhere near that bastard again. Sheriff McAllister fired back, his tone defensive. Cole Maddox has half the damn town behind him. You can't fight that kind of weight. I've fought worse. You sure about that? Rhett didn't answer. Alara swung her legs carefully over the edge of the bed, wincing as pain rippled through her ribs. The door cracked open a moment later. McAllister stepping inside with all the grace of a man walking into something unpleasant. He tipped his head at her. Mornin'. Doc says you're steady enough to sit, long as you don't push it. Alara ignored him. Her gaze found Rhett the moment he came in behind the sheriff, filling the doorway with his broad frame and dark coat. Something tightened in her chest at the sight. Relief, maybe. Or something more dangerous. You're up, he said, voice softer now, eyes scanning her for signs of pain she wasn't admitting to. Not for long, the sheriff cut in. Cole wants her questioned. Says she stole from him. She didn't, Rhett snapped. McAllister raised his hands. Doesn't matter what I think. Cole's father funds half my damn budget. Alara's stomach twisted. The world always bent for the Maddox family. Always. She's not answering a damn thing, Rhett said. McAllister sighed. I'm not looking to get anyone killed today. Least of all you, he added to Alara. But the Maddox boys are ridden circles around the plaza waiting for you to show your face. She swallowed. Her mouth tasted of copper. Then we leave. McAllister stared at her with something almost like pity. Girl, you leave on your own. They'll hunt you. She's not leaving alone, Rhett said. The sheriff rolled his eyes. You really want to drag her into whatever mess you're packing. Folks around here talk. They say you're trouble. For the right people, Rhett replied. TCH, McAllister rubbed his forehead. Look, you to ride out of White Mesa before sunrise tomorrow. We avoid a bloodbath. But if you step foot outside this office today, Cole won't wait on the law. Rhett nodded once sharply. Then we don't step out today. McAllister studied them both, exhaled through his mustache, and left. The door shut. Silence washed in behind him. Rhett crossed the room and crouched beside Alara, resting his hat on his thigh. His voice dropped low, intimate in the quiet. You all right? She gave a brittle laugh. I've had better days. You shouldn't be talked back to Cole. She bristled. So I should have let him call me a thief? No, he said. You should have had someone to stand in front of you so he never got the chance. The words hit harder than any kick Cole had thrown. Alara looked away, throat tightening. People don't stand up for me. I'm not people. Her breath caught. The certainty in his voice startled her. It was simple, absolute, as if the choice had been made long before dawn. He dropped his gaze briefly, thumb tracing the wood grain of the cot. We'll ride before the sun's up. You'll be bruised, but you'll make it. The wagon. I'll get one. And supplies. I'll handle it. He met her eyes again. Just focus on breathin' without hurtin'. She inhaled and immediately regretted it. Pain flared sharp beneath her ribs. He steadied her instinctively, one hand behind her back. She stiffened, then let the tension drain. His touch wasn't claiming. It was grounding. Before either of them could speak, a soft knock came at the doorframe. Alara's breath stilled. Mateo Salazar stood there lanky, sun-browned, head in hand, shame carved deep in his features. He looked from her bruised face to Rhett's rigid posture and flinched. Alara, he murmured. She stiffened, instinctively pulling her braid over the bruises on her jaw. Mateo swallowed hard. I came to say I'm sorry. Rhett rose slowly, shoulders rolling back, stance widening. Not threatening, just present, watchful. Alara found Mateo's eyes. Sorry for what? His throat bobbed. For not stepping in. For watchin'. While his voice cracked. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But Cole owns half of you, she said softly. I know, no. Mateo shook his head violently. He doesn't own my soul, Quinn. She held his gaze. Saw the guilt, the shame, the desperation of a man who'd chosen silence and was drowning in the aftermath. It's too late, she whispered. No, Rhett said from behind her, voice low. Maybe late. Not too late. Both of them looked at him. Rhett continued. A man doesn't fix a mistake by pretending it didn't happen. He fixes it by making sure it doesn't happen again. Mateo blinked rapidly, emotion flooding his eyes. If you to leave town, I can help cover tracks. I can hold off Cole's boys long enough to give you a head start. Rhett considered him. You'd do that. Mateo nodded fiercely. I should have done more yesterday. Should have been the one to pull them off her. Should have. Alara touched his sleeve gently. Mateo, you're doing something now. His breath shuddered. Rhett stepped forward and extended his hand. Mateo hesitated, then clasped it. We'll take whatever help you're offering, Rhett said. But don't die for us. A humorless smile flickered across Mateo's lips. Dying ain't what scares me anymore. Alara's stomach twisted. She didn't want another man risking his life because of her. But the choice wasn't hers to take back. Mateo left a few minutes later, slipping out the back alley door to avoid Cole's eyes. When the room quieted again, Alara sagged back against the pillow. Rhett watched her with a strange gentleness. He'll make good on that. Mateo Salazar's got a spine, just forgot where he left it till now. He shouldn't have to endanger himself, she murmured. Rhett's gaze sharpened. Neither should you. Their eyes held. A thunderous crack split the air outside a gunshot. Alara jerked upright, panic flaring. Rhett moved faster than thought, pushing her gently down, striding to the window. He peered through the shutters. "Relax," he said after a second. Some drunk fired into the air near the saloon. "Not Maddox, boys. Not yet." Yet. The word cocooned the room with tension. Alara rubbed her temples. "White Mesa wasn't always like this. It didn't get this way overnight," Rhett said. "Men like Maddox do what they want, because everyone else thinks someone else'll fix it." He turned from the window and came back to her bedside. "Cole's not the root," he continued. "He's the branch. The rot's deeper." She frowned. "You mean his father?" "I mean Silas Brigham." A chill crawled across her spine. "You really think he's near?" Rhett's jaw clenched. "Silas goes where opportunities are ripe. A lawman who turned in half his gang shows up alive. You bet he's sniffing round." A tremor rippled through her. "So we're not running from Cole." "No," he said quietly. "We're running from a ghost who carries fire in his hands." Her breath stilled. He wasn't being dramatic, he was remembering. Suddenly, everything about him made terrible sense. The long silences, the severity, the way he'd thrown himself between her and Cole without thinking. A man who'd once lost everything didn't tolerate watching someone else fall. She whispered, "Are you sure running is the right thing?" "I'm sure staying is the wrong one." A beat of silence passed before he added, "We get to my place in Red Rock Basin, settle in, get you well. Then we figure the rest, we." His eyes locked on hers. "You think I'm dropping you in a cabin and ridden off?" "Not how I work." The answer rooted warmth inside her bones. Dangerous warmth. But she didn't fight it. A soft rustling sound echoed through the hallway. Doc appeared again, arms full of bandages. He gave her one last examination, muttering about bruising, swelling, and idiots who think walking is optional. When he finished, he turned to Rhett. "If you're leaving at dawn, you'd better keep her off her feet until then. No Jocelyn, no excitement, no." A rock cracked sharply against the window, cutting him off. Rhett was at the shutters instantly. He peeked through, breath held. Outside, Cole Maddox stood in the street surrounded by Royce and Jeb. Cole held another rock, tossing it lazily from palm to palm. "Callahan," Cole's voice boomed. "Come out and take your beating." Alara's blood iced. Rhett didn't move. Cole laughed. "What, you scared? Thought big heroes didn't hide behind curtains." Rhett stepped back from the window, face unreadable, voice steady. "He doesn't know we're leaving," he said quietly. "He thinks cornering us today gives him the advantage." Alara swallowed. "Are you going to confront him?" "No." Rhett put his hat on slowly, deliberate as sunrise. "I'm gonna let him think he owns the daylight." Her brow furrowed. "Why? So we can own the dark." The room stilled. Even Doc Hennigan didn't breathe. Rhett moved toward the back exit. "I'll get the wagon, supplies, extra water skins." He paused at the threshold and looked at her direct, fierce, unflinching. "You rest, you breathe, and at first light, you walk out of White Mesa alive. Because I'm not leaving you to die in a town that thinks you're worth less than dust." Her throat tightened. Words tangled. Emotion burned behind her ribs. Just before he slipped out the door, he added the line she knew would never leave her. "I rode past once. I don't ride past anymore." The door shut. Doc exhaled. "Girl, you've hitched yourself to a storm." Alara sank back against the pillow, heart thundering, mind racing. Outside, Cole Maddox shouted insults into the street, daring Rhett to face him. Inside, she could only think of one thing: tomorrow, dawn, a way out. But far beyond White Mesa, in the direction of Red Rock Basin, a rider with a scar across his jaw urged his horse closer. Silas Brigham had caught Rhett Callahan's scent, and dawn would bring more than escape, it would bring him. Dawn in White Mesa never arrived gently. It came in a hard slash of crimson light spilling over the rooftops, turning the dust roads into streaks of blood and gold. Alara Quinn felt every heartbeat in her ribs as she tightened the last buckle on the small satchel. Doc had allowed her to carry nothing more than a change of clothes, a few strips of jerky, and the tiny keepsake she'd hidden for years, a single silver button from her mother's old shawl. She stared at it for a long moment before tucking it away. Outside the back door of the doctor's office, the world was still half asleep. The town's breath held in a fragile hush. Rhett Callahan waited near the corner, leading a small wagon he'd borrowed from the livery. The horse hitched to it, a dapple-gray mare snorted clouds of steam into the morning chill. Rhett lifted his head when he saw her. "You ready?" Her ribs screamed when she climbed the step, but she managed a tight nod. "As ready as I'll ever be." Doc Hennigan hovered behind her like a worried uncle. "Keep her still, Callahan. And for God's sake, don't let her ride over any rocks the size of a fist." Rhett smirked. "I'll avoid the mountains then." "Not funny," Doc muttered. Alara reached back, lightly squeezing the doctor's hand. "Thank you for not turning me away." Doc's face softened. "Girl, sometimes you gotta pick a side in this town. I'm just sorry it took me this long to do it." Before she could answer, a small, sharp whistle cut through the air. Mateo Salazar stepped from between the feed barrels behind the livery, his hat pulled low, his face tense. He looked ready to run or fight. "Streets clear," he murmured. "Cole and his boys drank themselves stupid last night after hollerin' into the dirt. For that gunfighter to come fight 'em. They won't be up for another hour at least." Rhett gave a single grateful nod. "Appreciate it." Mateo hesitated, guilt flashing across his face. "I'll keep 'em busy if they wake early. Maybe block their trail a bit. Buy you time." "You've already done enough," Alara said. Mateo shook his head. "No, not yet." Rhett stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Don't get yourself killed trying to fix yesterday." Mateo's jaw tightened. "Better that than pretendin' I didn't watch a friend get beat half to death." His eyes flicked to Alara. "Ride safe." He slipped back into the alleyway, vanishing like a ghost. Rhett climbed into the wagon seat, offering Alara his hand. She took it, settling beside him with careful movements. The first jolt of the wheels made her bite down on a groan. "You all right?" he asked quietly. "I'll survive." Rhett flicked the reins, and the mare started forward, hooves muffled on the dusty road. They moved at a slow pace, the town waking around them, a man sweeping his porch, a woman shaking crumbs from a tablecloth, a dog limping across the street. But no Maddox men, not yet. White Mesa looked almost peaceful in this light, almost kind, almost. Alara kept her gaze fixed ahead so she wouldn't look at the spot where Cole had beaten her. But memory painted the ground red anyway. Rhett noticed her breath hitch and said nothing, only maneuvered the wagon so she wouldn't have to see the exact stretch of dirt where she'd bled. They were nearly at the edge of town when the saloon doors banged open. Royce Devereaux stumbled out, shirt half-buttoned, hair sticking up like he'd slept in a haystack. He blinked at the wagon, confused at first, then his face twisted. "Well, look at that," he slurred. "Little laundress got herself an escort." Rhett didn't even slow down. Royce staggered into the street, raising his voice. Hey, Callahan. Cole ain't gonna like you running off with his property." Alara's heart dropped into her boots. Rhett didn't spare the man a glance. "Sit down, Royce. You ain't sober enough to aim a toothpick." Royce's expression curdled. "We're gonna find you, girl. You hear me? Cole's gonna," Rhett said, "touch my gun belt again, and you'll lose fingers." Royce froze. Because Rhett hadn't moved, hadn't drawn, but something in his voice was colder than a canyon winter. The wagon rolled past. They cleared the last building, wheels hitting open desert. White Mesa shrank behind them, swallowed by light. Alara didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until Rhett said, "You can breathe now." She exhaled shakily. "I thought he'd follow." "He will," Rhett murmured. "But not today. He's too drunk to saddle a horse, let alone lead a chase." The road stretched long ahead of them, flanked by low sagebrush and distant mesas painted coral by dawn. The desert opened wide, and with each mile, some piece of White Mesa loosened its grip on her chest. Some, not all. After a while, Alara asked, "Your place in Red Rock Basin, what's it like?" Rhett kept his eyes on the horizon. "Quiet, safe enough. Got a barn, a well, a house that hasn't collapsed yet." "That sounds comforting." "It's a start," he said. "Not a home." Silence settled between them, heavy, but not uncomfortable. She studied him in profile, the hard jaw, the faint shadow of stubble, the lines carved from years of sun and loss. He carried pain like a man who'd grown used to its weight. "You really think Silas Brigham is near?" she asked. Rhett's fingers tightened on the reins. "I know he is." "How?" His breath left him in a slow, controlled exhale. Men like Silas don't forget the people who slipped away. He's been lurking in the canyons for years, taking work wherever folks are desperate enough to hire devils. And White Mesa is desperate. White Mesa is corrupt, Rhett corrected. And corrupt places attract monsters. Alara shivered despite the heat. If he finds you, he won't, Rhett said. Not if we stay ahead. The wagon creaked over a rise. As they descended toward a narrow cut in the land at choke point, between two sandstone ridges, Rhett's gaze sharpened. Trouble, he murmured. Alara tensed. What kind? He nodded toward the ridge ahead. Two riders waited there, Royce Devereaux and Jeb Crowley. Her lungs went tight. How? They didn't follow us, Rhett said. They cut us off. Somebody told em we'd be heading this way. Might have been loose talk in the saloon last night. Might have been someone who owed Cole a favor. Alara's hands trembled. What do we do? Stay still, Rhett said. And don't breathe too loud. The wagon slowed to a stop as Royce grinned down from his saddle. Well, look who thought they could sneak out like thieves. Rhett kept his voice calm. Move aside. Royce's grin widened. Or what? You'll kill both of us in front of the lady? If I have to, Jeb spat. Cole wants her back. Rhett's jaw ticked. She ain't property. Everything's property if the right man says so, Royce replied. Alara felt sick, furious, terrified. Rhett slowly opened his coat, revealing the butt of his Colt. A calculated move. Warning, not threat. The riders shifted uneasily. Then another voice drifted down from the ridge above them, calm, cool, like wind sliding over stone. You're watching the wrong wolves. All three men jerked their heads up. A woman stood there tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in a woven vest and desert leathers, a long rifle resting against her hip, raven black hair braided over one shoulder. Nara Yazzie. Alara remembered the name from travelers' stories, a Navajo tracker who followed trails. Nobody else could read. Nara tilted her head, studying the ambush with detached curiosity. If you boys got any sense, you'll ride on home, Royce bristled. You stay out of this. Nara lifted her rifle an inch. I wasn't talking to Callahan, Jeb blinked. Then who? Nara's eyes lifted toward the far canyon mouth. The real killer's already in your hills, and his name is Silas Brigham. A heavy silence fell. Even the wind stilled. Rhett's shoulders went rigid. Royce paled. Brigham, here? You think he wouldn't hear Rhett Callahan crawled out of his grave? Nara said, voice flat. He's been circling the basin for 3 nights. Jeb swallowed. We gotta tell Cole. You do that, Nara said. He'll love knowing he's next on Silas's list. The riders panicked, spurred their horses, and bolted back the way they'd come, raising dust clouds behind them. When they vanished, Nara slid down the ridge with the easy grace of someone born to the land. Red-eyed her. You following us? Following him, she said, jerking her chin toward the distant canyons. Silas leaves a trail only fools ignore. Her gaze shifted to Alara, assessing, sharp, not unkind. You're hurt. Alara stiffened. I've had better days. Nara's lips twitched faintly. You'll need worse ones before this is done. Red exhaled through his nose. We're heading for my place in Red Rock Basin. Not far enough, Nara warned. But it'll do for now. Will you come with us? Alara asked quietly. Nara studied her a long moment. Something unreadable flickered in her dark eyes. No, she said finally. But I'll find you again. She stepped back, lifted her rifle, and gave Rhett one last pointed look. Keep your eyes open. Silas never hits once. He tests a place, then burns it. Then she turned and melted into the desert as though she were part of it. The wagon sat in the road, dust settling around them. Alara whispered, Rhett, is she right? Will Silas find us? Rhett flicked the reins, voice low. He already has. The mare surged forward, carrying them deeper into the basin toward the ranch, toward safety, toward danger, toward the place where the fire would begin. The trail into Red Rock Basin narrowed into a winding ribbon of red sand and cedar scrub, the kind of country that swallowed sound and light whole. Alara braced herself against the wagon's side as Rhett guided the mare through the rocky pass. Hours had passed since Nara Yazzie vanished into the desert, but her warning lingered in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Silas never hits once. He tests a place, then burns it. Alara shivered. Rhett hadn't spoken much since. His jaw was locked tight, hands steady on the reins but coiled with tension. She could almost feel the storm gathering under his skin. The canyon walls opened suddenly, unveiling a basin bathed in copper sunlight. A weathered fence, a leaning barn, and a small two-story ranch house sat against the sheltering slope of a red mesa. It wasn't grand. It wasn't pretty, but it looked like it had once been a home. Alara drew a slow, shaky breath. "This is yours." Rhett nodded. "What's left of it?" They rolled toward the porch. A wind gust lifted dust devils across the yard, rattling the loose shutters. As Rhett pulled the wagon to a stop, Alara caught sight of something hanging crooked near the front door, a rusted horseshoe, nailed in place long ago. A charm against bad luck. A whisper of hope. Her chest tightened. Rhett hopped down and offered his hand. "Easy now." She took it, easing herself to the ground. Her ribs protested, but she held her breath and pushed through the pain. Rhett didn't let go until he was sure her legs weren't about to give out. The porch creaked beneath their weight. Alara brushed her fingers across the wooden railing. It was splintered, sun-bleached, but solid. "How long since you've been here?" she asked. 3 years. His voice was low, pulled taut. "I come back once in a while. Fix what's breaking. Ride out again. Why not stay?" He didn't answer. Instead, he unlocked the door and stepped inside first. Alara followed. The interior was dim and stale with disuse. Dust lay thick over every surface. Sheets draped over old furniture like ghostly shrouds. Faded toys lay abandoned on a small rug. Wooden animals, a carved horse missing a leg, a tiny beaded bracelet. Her throat closed. She'd known there were ghosts here. She hadn't expected them to feel this real. Rhett walked farther in, shoulders stiff, gaze fixed straight ahead, refusing to look at anything too closely. His boots echoed on the wooden floor. "Alara," he said quietly, "you don't have to," but she already had. Her eyes lingered on the photograph in the crooked frame above the mantel, a woman with kind eyes, and 2 children, smiling against the same porch they'd just stepped onto. Rhett wasn't in the picture. Maybe he'd been the one holding the camera. Her voice came out gentle. "Your wife." He swallowed hard. "Anna, and your children?" "Eli and May." The names cracked in the air, brittle as dry leaves. They were 6 and 3. Alara's heart ached. She felt like she was trespassing on a grave. Rhett dragged a hand through his hair. "I should have thrown this stuff away. Put it somewhere. Done something." "No," she whispered. "It's not wrong to keep what you loved." He looked at her then, pain raw in his eyes before he masked it with practiced restraint. "I'll get you settled," he muttered, turning away to fast. While Rhett fetched water from the well, Alara moved carefully through the house, lifting sheets, dusting surfaces with the cloth she kept in her satchel. It wasn't her place, but she couldn't sit still. The silence in the house was thick, heavy with years of grief. She found the kitchen spice jars still lining the shelf, a kettle on the stove, dried flowers in a cracked vase, life frozen mid-breath. A spike of pain twisted in her chest. Rhett had built walls around his heart and braced them with sorrow, and she was stepping into the one place that had broken him. She was wiping down a counter when he returned, setting a full bucket beside the sink. He watched her silently, leaning against the doorframe. "You don't have to clean," he said. "It helps," she admitted. "Keeps my mind busy." "Busy from what?" "Remembering." He nodded once, slowly. They worked in companionable silence until the sun dipped lower behind the mesa. Rhett lit a lamp, its warm glow pushing shadows into corners. The house began to feel less like a tomb. A small moment, but a real one. He gestured toward the stairs. "Your room's up there. It's clean enough, I think." She followed him up the creaking steps. The guest room was simple: a bed, a small dresser, a window overlooking the basin. A soft breeze drifted through the cracked pane. "I'll bring extra blankets," Rhett said. "It gets cold at night." Alara approached the window, fingertips grazing the sill. "This place is beautiful, Rhett," he snorted softly. "You're the first person to say that. I mean it." He leaned against the doorframe again, arms crossed. "Haven't had someone in this house since." "Well, since." She turned. "You rebuilt it, piece by piece." He shrugged. "Didn't fix much. You fixed enough to keep standing," she said. He let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "You keep rebuilding walls and calling it penance," she murmured suddenly. But a house isn't a grave unless you decide to bury yourself in it. His head snapped up. Emotion flashed across his face: shock, anger, hurt, something else beneath all of it. "Alara," he rasped, "you don't know a damn thing about. I know what it's like to live with ghosts." She held his gaze, steady despite her racing pulse. "I know what it's like to think moving forward means forgetting. It doesn't." His jaw worked. "And what if staying still is the only way I keep what's left of them?" She stepped closer. "Then you're not keeping them. You're losing yourself." The air between them crackled like static before a lightning strike. He broke eye contact first, exhaling sharply. "You need rest." She didn't argue. Her ribs throbbed with every breath. Rhett turned to leave, but before he stepped out, he paused without looking at her. "You're wrong about one thing," he said quietly. "What's that?" "This house." His voice wavered. "Just barely. It stopped being a grave the moment you walked in." Her breath caught. Then he descended the stairs. Alara sat carefully on the bed, pressing a hand to her ribs, feeling the sting of bruises layered over bruises. But for the first time since White Mesa, the ache inside her chest wasn't just fear or shame. It was something unfamiliar, something wary but warm. Hope. After a few minutes, she rose and wandered downstairs. Rhett stood outside on the porch, looking at the horizon as the sky blood pink and orange. She hesitated at the threshold but joined him. He didn't turn, but his voice softened. "You shouldn't be up. And yet here I am." A faint smile ghosted his lips. They watched the basin settle into twilight, crickets starting their song. It was peaceful in a way she'd almost forgotten existed, until a sound cut through the quiet. A rustle from the ridge above the house. Rhett stiffened instantly. Inside, Alara didn't move fast enough. He grabbed her arm, gentle but urgent hand pulled her behind him. Another rustle, a shadow shifting in the brush. Alara's heart slammed against her ribs. "Rhett," he stepped off the porch, hand drifting toward his gun. The wind carried a whisper of dry laughter. A coyote howled from the distance. But this shadow wasn't a coyote. Not with the way it stood upright. Not with the way it watched them. Rhett stared into the darkness, every muscle taut. He didn't draw, but his fingers hovered close to his holster. The shadow held still for several long, stretching seconds. Then it vanished behind the ridge, footsteps crunching softly before fading. Alara gripped the porch railing to stay upright. "Was that?" Rhett's voice was barely a breath. "Silas's men. Scoutin'. Maybe him." Her blood chilled. He guided her back inside, shutting the door with a quiet finality that told her he already knew what she hoped wasn't true. They weren't safe here, not yet. Not with footsteps in the dark. Not with ghosts walking the ridges. And as Rhett doused the lamp, plunging the house into shadow, the truth settled over them both like a tightening noose. The basin wasn't just a refuge. It was bait, and Silas Brigham had found it. Alara woke before the sun, pulled from sleep by a prickle at the base of her spine, an instinct that whispered she wasn't alone. The basin lay quiet beyond her window, still wrapped in a faint lavender glow. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined the shadow she and Rhett had seen the night before. Then she saw it, a single footprint near the fence line, fresh, the edges still sharp. Someone had been there at dawn. Her pulse stuttered. She pulled her shawl tight and made her way downstairs, wincing at the tug of bruised ribs. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, echoing loudly in the quiet house. Rhett wasn't in the kitchen, not in the parlor either. She stepped outside onto the porch. Rhett was already out in the yard, crouched low in the pale morning light. He turned as she approached, his expression dark. "You shouldn't be up." She ignored the warning. "Rhett, that's a footprint, isn't it?" 3 sets, he corrected. "To men, maybe 3. They walked the perimeter in the night." His jaw tightened. "That wasn't just a scout." Her stomach dipped. "They're watching us. They're planning," he said. "Big difference." Alara knelt beside him despite the protest in her ribs. "What do we do?" He looked at her, really looked, eyes searching hers as if measuring how much truth she could take. "We prepare." The word hung like a blade between them. Preparation meant expectation. Expectation meant danger. Could it have been coyotes? Alara asked weakly. Rhett shook his head. "Coyotes don't smoke cigarettes." He held up a half-burned roll-up he'd found near the barn. "Silas's men do." Her breath hitched. "He's here, then, close," Rhett murmured. "Closer than I'd hoped." The basin, beautiful in the morning light, felt like a trap now wide open. No cover, the house exposed on all sides. She shivered despite the growing warmth. Rhett stood, brushing dust off his palms. "Come on. We need to check the barn." Alara followed him across the yard, the crunch of gravel under their feet sounding unnaturally loud. The barn door groaned when Rhett pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of hay and old wood. But something else lingered to an acrid scent that turned Alara's stomach. "Smoke," she whispered. "From last night?" "No," Rhett said tightly. "Newer." She scanned the floor. "Rhett, look." A pile of dried brush had been tucked against the barn wall, another beneath a beam, all of it arranged deliberately. "Kindling," Rhett growled. "They planned to start a fire, but they didn't." "No," his eyes hardened. "They wanted us to know they could." Alara rubbed her arms, suddenly cold. "Why wait?" Rhett didn't answer right away. He stepped to the open barn door, gaze scanning the ridge. The desert wind stirred, lifting dust like whispering ghosts. "Alara," he said quietly, "a man like Silas Brigham never wastes a first strike." "What do you mean?" "He tests you, watches how you move, how you defend yourself." His voice turned hard. "Then he hits when you're tired, scared, distracted." She swallowed. "Isn't that what last night was?" His bitter smile sent a chill through her. Last night was him saying hello. The silence that followed stretched until it felt like a noose tightening around her ribs. Then footsteps behind them. Alara spun, heart in her throat. Nara Yazzie stood at the barn entrance, her rifle slung over one shoulder, dust in her braids. She surveyed the scene without a flicker of surprise. "You just sleep through much?" she asked dryly. Rhett's shoulders dropped a fraction, relief disguised as irritation. "Good to see you too, Nara. I've been tracking smoke trails since dawn." Nara paced the barn slowly, her sharp eyes inspecting every corner. "Brigham's got at least 4 riders sweeping the basin. Maybe more." Alara felt her pulse race. "Why didn't they attack yet?" "They're waiting," Nara said simply. "Men like Silas study fear the way other men study maps." Rhett nodded grimly. "That's what I told her." Nara turned to Alara, expression softer. "You're hurt." "I'm alive," Alara said. Thanks to him. Nara's gaze flicked between them, reading more than either wanted to admit. Then her eyes landed on the scattered kindling. She knelt, picked up a piece, sniffed it. "This was gathered last night." She dropped it. "They're seeing how close they can get without you waking up." Alara's breath caught in her throat. "They came that close to the house?" Nara nodded. "Silas likes sending messages." Rhett stepped in front of Alara instinctively. "And I'm sending one back." Nara snorted. "Yeah, you shooting coyotes or ghosts these days." Rhett's jaw clenched. "I'm not waiting for him to burn this place." Nara leaned against a beam, arms crossed. "So what's your plan, Ranger?" "Don't call me that," he muttered. "Fine, ex-Ranger." She raised a brow. "Still need a plan." Rhett stared at the barn door, far away in his thoughts. "We reinforce the house. Check the well. Make sure the animals can run if they need to." And he hesitated. "And what?" Alara pressed. Rhett turned to her, expression unreadable. "I teach you to shoot." Her breath froze. "Rhett, I can't." "You're not helpless," he said, gentle but firm. "You proved that on the road yesterday. Standing still never saved anyone out here." She hesitated, fingers trembling slightly. "I don't want to kill anyone. You might need to," he said quietly. "But that ain't why I'm teaching you." He stepped closer. "I'm teaching you so you never feel that helpless again, not with Maddox, not with Silas, not with anyone." The truth in his eyes, the steady, unwavering belief struck something deep inside her. Nara pushed off the beam. "He's right. The desert doesn't care about fair fights." Alara squared her shoulders, breath shaky, but determined. "All right, then. Teach me." Rhett nodded once, approving. They stepped outside. The wind kicked up dust as Rhett placed a small derringer into her hands. Her fingers wrapped around the handle awkwardly. "First," he said, guiding her grip, "you don't fight the gun. You work with it." His hands steadied hers, warm, strong, certain. The moment stretched to close, to intimate, but then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "Stand with your feet apart. Good. Arms steady." Alara lifted the gun toward the old fence post he'd pointed at. "Breathe in," he said. "Hold, let half of it out." Then squeeze, don't jerk. The shot cracked through the basin, echoing off the red cliffs. The recoil jolted her arms, but she didn't drop the gun. Rhett's mouth quirked. Not bad. She blinked. I missed. Barely. Her heartbeat steadied with a new kind of strength. They practiced until her arms trembled. By late afternoon, she managed to hit the post twice. Each time, Rhett's quiet, proud nod was worth more than the accuracy. But as the sun dipped low, Nara stiffened suddenly. Visitors, she said. Rhett followed her gaze. Dust clouds rose from beyond the ridge. Riders. Alara's pulse hammered painfully. Rhett grabbed her arm not roughly, but urgently. Inside. Now. She didn't argue. She sprinted for the porch as fast as her ribs allowed. Rhett and Nara stayed outside, guns drawn, watching the ridge with predator stillness. Minutes passed like hours. Finally the dust cloud veered, not toward the ranch, but down a distant slope, disappearing behind a ridge. Nara lowered her rifle. Scouts. Just scouts. Alara let out a trembling breath. Rhett holstered his gun slowly. They're getting bold. Nara nodded grimly. This place won't stay quiet long. Alara met Rhett's gaze. Fear pressed tight in her chest. How long do we have? Rhett answered without hesitation. Not long enough. Nara slung her rifle across her back. I'll set camp on the ridge tonight. You just stay inside. Light no lamps. Let the house go dark. Rhett nodded. If you see movement, I'll give you one warning, Nara said. After that, shoot first or die second. Alara swallowed hard. When Nara walked off into the coming dark, Rhett closed the door and barred it. Then he turned to Alara, shadows slicing his face in two. Tonight, he said quietly, we stay awake. She nodded, understanding the weight in those words. And as the house settled into an uneasy silence, the basin outside whispered with invisible footsteps, the kind that came before fire. The fire reached her before the scream did. Alara jerked awake to the sharp, burnt sweet smell of smoke threading through the floorboards. Thin but unmistakable. For one heartbeat she thought she was dreaming some leftover nightmare from White Mesa. But then she heard the animals. The horses were screaming. Not whinnying, screaming. Boots pounded the hallway. Rhett burst into her room a split second later, shirt half buttoned, gun already in his hand. His eyes were pure storm. Alara up, now. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, pain lancing through her ribs. What's the barn's on fire? He snapped. And we're not alone. That tore the sleep from her bones. Rhett grabbed her arm and practically dragged her down the stairs. Heat hit them the moment he opened the front door dry, choking, rising in waves from outside. The night sky glowed orange. The barn was burning. Flames chewed through the roof, spitting sparks into the darkness. The horses inside kicked and thrashed against the stalls, and the wild terror in their cries made Alara's heart lurch painfully. Oh God, she whispered. Stay behind me, Rhett ordered. But the moment they cleared the porch, a shot cracked through the air so close it sliced the wind beside Rhett's head. He shoved Alara down. Get cover. More gunfire exploded from the shadows near the ridge. Figures moved just beyond the firelight 5, maybe 6 of them riders dismounting. Men spreading out like wolves circling prey. Silas's men. Rhett fired twice, forcing the closest shapes to dive behind the boulders. The flames roared louder, climbing higher into the night. Rhett, Alara shouted over the gunfire. The barn, horses first, he growled. Then them, Alara. Another voice shouted from the dark. Left ridge. Nara Yazzie. She appeared like she'd stepped out of the fire itself, silhouette sharp, rifle raised. A single clean crack echoed, and one of Silas's men dropped from the ridge like a crumpled shadow. The others scattered. Rhett grabbed Alara by the shoulders. Listen to me. Stay low. Follow my voice. Don't break from cover unless I tell you. She nodded, throat tight. He sprinted toward the burning barn. Alara followed, crouched low, heart hammering as sparks rained above them. Heat blasted her skin, even from several yards away. Screams human and animal mingled in the flames. Rhett slammed his shoulder into the barn door, forcing it open a crack. Smoke billowed out, stinging their eyes. They're panicking, Alara choked. Then help me calm them, he said through gritted teeth. Talk to them, what? Just do it. Another gunshot pinged off the barn's metal hinge. Alara dropped to her knees beside the opening, ignoring the way the dirt dug into her palms. She closed her eyes, fighting panic, and called softly into the barn, "Easy. Easy there. We're here. We're gonna get you out." A terrified whinny tore through the smoke, but she kept speaking, voice trembling but steady. "You're not alone. Just breathe. We're right here." The horses' pounding slowed barely, just enough. Rhett seized the moment and forced the door wider, slipping inside through the choking haze. "Rhett!" she screamed, but he was already cutting the first stall rope. Another shot shattered the lantern beside her head. Alara ducked, coughing hard as dust and sparks showered down. Nara's voice rang out from the ridge, fierce and urgent. "Crowley's moving to your right." Alara squinted toward the shadows. Sure enough, Jeb Crowley crept along the fence line, gun raised. Eyes locked on Rhett's silhouette inside the barn. Alara didn't think. She raised her derringer, breath shaking, heart pounding wildly. Jeb aimed at the stall door where Rhett was working. "Alara Quinn!" Nara shouted. "Take the shot." Alara squeezed the trigger. The crack was small, almost delicate against the roar of the fire. But Jeb jerked backward, gun flying from his hand, scream ripping from his throat as he dropped behind the fence. Not dead, but out. Her hands trembled violently. "I did that." Rhett burst from the barn, leading to terrified horses through the smoke. "That was you?" he yelled. She nodded, still shaking. He grabbed her face with one soot-streaked hand. "You saved my life." Then he yanked her back into motion. "Move." More riders charged down from the ridge, Royce Devereaux among them, face twisted with fury. "Alara Quinn," he bellowed. "Silas wants you alive. That makes one of us." Rhett shouted back, firing. Nara took the high ground, dropping another of Silas's men with flawless precision. Her calm contrasted sharply with the chaos below. Flames, screams, the metallic taste of gunfire. But the fire was winning. The barn roof groaned, sagging under its own weight. "Alara!" Rhett roared. "Get clear!" She stumbled backward just as the structure collapsed inward. A tidal wave of sparks erupting skyward. Heat slammed into her chest, stealing her breath. The surviving horses bolted, hooves pounding a frantic rhythm across the basin. Then, suddenly, silence. Not true silence. The fire still crackled. The wind still hissed. But the gunfire had stopped. Royce and the remaining riders were gone, faded into the night, like phantoms retreating from a battlefield that wasn't yet finished. Nara hurried down from the ridge, rifle still raised. "Nobody's left except the one I dropped." They pulled back fast. Rhett sheathed his gun, chest heaving. "They'll come again." "Of course they will," Nara said flatly. "Silas never quits before he draws blood." Alara pressed a hand to her ribs, shaking all over. "They burned the barn. They could have burned the house. They wanted us scared," Nara replied. "Wanted us awake, off balance." Alara's voice cracked. "It worked." Rhett stepped to her side, brushing soot from her hair. His hands were rough, but his touch was gentle. "I know you're scared," he said, eyes dark with a mixture of fury and gratitude. "But you didn't freeze. You did everything right tonight." He glanced at the fallen barn. "If not for you, I'd be under that roof." Alara swallowed hard. "I wasn't trying to kill him. You saved me," Rhett said again, firmer this time. "You saved both of us." Nara looked between them, then toward the burning remains of the barn. "This was the first strike," Rhett nodded grimly. "And the next one will be worse." Nara squatted beside the ashes, ran her fingers over the dirt. "Crowley dropped a match bundle before he fell. That wasn't about killing your horses. That was about making sure you knew they can hit you anytime they want." Alara's breath shook. "What do we do?" Rhett looked toward the horizon, eyes narrowed, jaw set like stone. "We don't wait here for Silas to decide our fate. We take the fight to him." Nara raised a brow. "You sure you're ready for that?" Rhett didn't hesitate. "I'm done running." He took Alara's hand, guiding her away from the ruins. His grip was strong, steady, certain in a way that made her chest tighten. "Tomorrow," he said, "we ride to Red Ridge." Alara stared at him, heart pounding. "To find help, to make allies," Rhett said, "and to end this on our terms." Nara's eyes glinted in the firelight. "Silas won't like that." Rhett looked back at the burning barn, his past, his safety, his sanctuary turned to ash. "No," he murmured, "but I'm past caring what Silas likes." Alara felt the shift in the air, the turning of something deep and irreversible. Rhett Callahan was done hiding, and in the flames behind them, Silas Brigham's war had officially begun. The path to Red Ridge and everything waiting there unfolded before them like a long shadow. The road to Red Ridge felt different than the road out of White Mesa. Leaving White Mesa had been about escape survival. But this one was about choosing to fight, about stepping toward danger instead of away from it. The morning air held the faint scent of burnt timber from what was left of the barn. Alara tried not to look back at the smoking ruins as she climbed into the wagon beside Rhett. Nara rode ahead on horseback, her silhouette sharp against the rising sun. Mateo met them at the foot of the basin, eyes tired, but full of something close to resolve. "Tracks everywhere," Mateo reported. "Silas's riders were thick in the hills last night. I counted 7, maybe 8, Rhett nodded once. "They'll follow us, I know," Mateo said. "That's why I'm comin'," Rhett hesitated. But Mateo shook his head, jaw set. "I stood by and watched Alara get beaten in the dirt. I'm not standin' on the sidelines again." Alara's chest tightened. "We don't want you hurt because of us." He gave her a small, grim smile. "Too late for wantin', Quinn. Right's right. Wrong's wrong." Rhett studied him for a long moment, then reached down and clasped Mateo's forearm. "All right, but you ride with your eyes open." Mateo mounted up and took the rear guard position behind the wagon. Together, the 4 of them headed toward Red Ridge. The trail cut through scrub forest and rolling desert slopes. Sunlight spilled across distant mesas like gold poured over stone. It should have been beautiful, but the shadow of Silas Brigham rode with them, unseen but heavy. Alara clutched her shawl tighter. "Do you think he'll attack before we reach town?" Rhett flicked a glance over his shoulder at the distant ridges. "Not today. He's watchin'. But he wants us alive for a bigger show," Nara snorted. "Silas doesn't do simple. He does dramatic, like burnin' down a barn in the middle of the night," Mateo muttered. "Exactly like that," Nara replied. Alara shuddered. "What does he want with us?" Rhett's knuckles whitened around the reins. "He wants me. Always has. Then why send so many men after me?" she asked quietly. Rhett hesitated. "Too long." Nara answered for him. "Because taking someone he cares for is how Silas likes to lure men into the open." Alara froze. "Someone he cares for?" Heat rose in her cheeks. Rhett didn't look at her, but his jaw flexed once, a small, tight movement that gave him away. Nara chuckled. "Relax, I meant Mateo." Mateo nearly fell off his horse. "Me." Rhett shot Nara a glare that could have burned through granite. She only grinned wider. But Alara wasn't fooled. She'd seen the look in Rhett's eyes when she fired at Crowley. She'd felt it when he pulled her from the collapsing barn. She'd heard it in his voice when he'd whispered, "You saved me." Something unspoken lived between them now. Something dangerous. Something she wasn't ready to name. Rhett cleared his throat. "Red Ridge is just up ahead." They crested a hill and there it was. Red Ridge, a rougher, larger town than White Mesa. Smoke rose from chimneys. Horses lined hitching posts. People moved through the streets with purpose. And in the center stood a 2-story brick building with a badge carved into the stone above the door. The U.S. Marshal's office. Rhett exhaled slowly. "Good. Hayes is still here." Nara raised a brow. "You trust him?" "As much as I trust any man with a badge and a conscience." "So half," Mateo muttered. Rhett almost smiled. They rode into town. Heads turned. People whispered. Some recognized Rhett. Others recognized Nara. A few recognized Alara's bruised face and shrank back in sympathy or fear. Rhett tethered the mare outside the marshal's office, then helped Alara down from the wagon. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary. Inside, Marshal Hayes looked up from a stack of paperwork. He was tall, square-jawed, with graying hair and a weary authority in his eyes, the kind of man who'd seen too much violence to be impressed by more. "Callahan," Hayes said, standing. "I heard you were dead." "Not yet," Rhett replied. "But someone's trying to change that." Hayes's eyes barely flicked to Alara, then to Nara. "Your company tells me who." "Silas Brigham," Rhett said simply. The marshal's face tightened. "Thought he was south of the border. Moved north," Nara said. "Got a pack of riders with him. Maybe more." Hayes motioned them into the back room. "Talk." Rhett explained everything White Mesa. the beating, the ambush, the burning barn, the scouts circling the basin. Alara watched Hayes grow more grim with each detail. When Rhett finished, the marshal paced slowly. Brigham's grown bold, too bold. If he's burnin' property this close to government land, he's crossin' a line even he shouldn't. He crossed every line the day he killed my family, Rhett said quietly. Hayes paused, looked Rhett square in the eyes. You know I don't have the manpower for a full raid. You don't need manpower, Nara said. You need strategy, Hayes nodded. And proof. Enough to hang him. You've got it now, Mateo said. Right here. Hayes shook his head. I need more than testimonies from victims he'll say are biased. I need evidence, witnesses, and I need men who can ride with me. Alara looked between them. So what do we do? The marshal thought for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a tin star. Rhett stiffened. Hayes tossed the badge onto the table. It skidded to a stop inches from Rhett's hand. I'm deputizing you, Callahan, Hayes said. All of you, if you're willin'. We'll ride into Chasm Ridge tomorrow. Find Brigham's camp. Bring him in alive if possible. Dead if not, Mateo swallowed. You mean, we're going after him? Hayes nodded. You wanted justice? This is it. Rhett didn't touch the star. You ready for this? Hayes asked quietly. Rhett's voice was low, rough. I've been ready for years. Alara felt something shift inside her fear. Yes, but also resolve. Hayes turned to her. And you? She lifted her chin. I'm not hiding anymore. Hayes studied her bruised ribs, her determined eyes. You're ridden into hell tomorrow. You understand that? She met Rhett's gaze. Hell already came for me. I survived. Hayes nodded. Then gear up. They spent the afternoon gathering supplies, ammo, bandages, food, fresh horses. Rhett bought Alara a sturdier coat and fitted her with a better holster for her derringer. When dusk settled, they regrouped outside the marshal's office. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and iron. Rhett walked Alara to the wagon. Their shoulders brushed. Neither moved away. You sure about this? He asked quietly. I am, she said. His eyes traced her face, lingering on her bruises. I don't want you in danger. You don't get to be my reason to live, and then leave me behind when it gets dangerous. She whispered fiercely. That's not love, Rhett. That's fear wearing a white hat. The words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He swallowed hard. Alara, she placed a hand on his chest. We go together. Or not at all. Rhett closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself, then nodded. Together, then, light footsteps approached. Nara smirked. You'd have done Mac and Eyes? Hayes wants us at the north gate, Dawn. Alara flushed. Rhett cleared his throat. Mateo trotted up, saddlebags slung over his shoulder. We ready? Rhett nodded. We're ready. As the moon lifted over Red Ridge, the four of them stood united, scarred, exhausted, outnumbered, but determined. Tomorrow, they would ride into outlaw country. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin. And somewhere far beyond the canyon walls, Silas Brigham smiled into the firelight, already waiting. They rode out of Red Ridge before sunrise, when the world was still a hushed, trembling thing. The air held a brittle chill, the kind that clung to bone and warned of a long, punishing day ahead. Alara pulled her new coat tightly round her shoulders, inhaling the scent of cedar and dust rising from the earth. She sat her horse with careful posture, her ribs sore, but bearable, Rhett riding close on her right, always within reach. The posse moved in a staggered line, Nara in the lead, her silhouette sharp against the growing light. Rhett and Alara in the middle, Mateo guarding the rear, and Marshal Hayes flanking them with two deputies who hadn't said more than 6 words since dawn. Chasm Ridge loomed ahead, a jagged maze of narrow cuts, sheer cliffs, and shadowed hollows. Beautiful from a distance, deadly up close. Rhett's voice cut through the steady rhythm of hooves. This land's made for ambush. Hayes nodded grimly. Brigham didn't choose it by accident. Nara lifted a hand, signaling them to slow. She crouched beside a patch of disturbed dust, fingertips sweeping lightly over the faint impression of a horseshoe. Fresh tracks, she murmured. 2 riders, maybe 3, not more than an hour old. Alara swallowed. Her heart beat faster despite the steady pace of her horse. Rhett leaned down in the saddle. Silas keeps scouts ahead of his main camp. Nara nodded without looking back. They'll report we're coming. He likes men to walk straight into his teeth, Mateo muttered from behind. Feels like we're playing chess with the devil. Alara tried to steady her breathing, but unease threaded through her like wire. She scanned the ridges towering above them. Every ledge seemed to curl inward, every shadow deep enough to hide a rifle. Rhett noticed her tension. Stick close, he said softly. She managed a tight smile. Trust me, I'm not wandering off. But her fingers curled, remembering the firelight, the barn collapsing, the look in Jeb Crowley's eyes before he fell. She wasn't afraid of fighting. She was afraid of losing Rhett in the chaos. The trail narrowed, forcing them into single file. Their horses' hooves clapped sharply against rock. The canyon walls rose higher, closing them in. The sound of the wind vanished, replaced by the eerie quiet of stone swallowing all noise. Nara turned in her saddle. Chasm Ridge splits in two about a mile ahead. We take the left path. Silas's main camp is somewhere beyond a box canyon. Hayes frowned. You certain? Certain as death, Nara replied. No one questioned it further. Minutes passed. The canyon tightened. The horses grew jumpy beneath them, snorting and tossing their heads. Rhett's hand drifted toward his gun. Something's wrong. Alara didn't see anything, didn't hear anything until Nara hissed, down. A bullet screamed overhead. Gunfire erupted from the ridges. Chaos exploded around them. Rhett yanked Alara's reins hard, pulling her horse behind a jut of rock. Stone chips flew as bullets shattered against the cliff beside them. Marshal Hayes shouted for the deputies to take cover. Mateo dove off his horse and rolled behind a boulder, narrowly missing a bullet that carved a line through the brim of his hat. Alara's heart hammered painfully. Dust filled her lungs as she pressed low against her horse's neck, her breath ragged. Through the smoke of gunfire and the echoing clang of bullets ricocheting off stone, she spotted movement on the ridge. Royce Devereaux. He grinned down at her like a wolf spotting prey. Rhett, she screamed. Rhett already saw him. He fired, driving Royce to cover, but more shots rained down from both sides. Hayes shouted, "We're pinned." Nara fired from her elevated position, precise, controlled, deadly. One outlaw toppled from a ledge, hitting the ground with a sickening thud, but another appeared almost instantly. "They're funneling us," Nara growled. "Crowley and Royce are pushing us toward the split." Rhett, Alara gasped, eyes wide. "What do? We push back," he said. Then he heard a faint metallic click from above. "Alara, move." He tackled her off her horse just as a shot tore through the air, where her head had been a heartbeat before. They hit the ground hard, the impact jolting her ribs so fiercely she saw stars. Rhett shielded her with his body as dust rained over them. "You all right?" She gasped. "I will be." But over his shoulder she saw movement. Jeb Crowley rising from behind a boulder, rifle aimed straight at Rhett's back. "Rhett!" she screamed. He spun, but too slow. Alara drew her derringer and fired. Jeb staggered backward, shock flashing across his face before he toppled over the ledge, tumbling into the canyon below. Alara's hands shook violently. Her breath trembled, but Rhett wasn't looking at Jeb. He was looking at her, eyes wide, shaken, filled with something fierce and raw. "You saved me," he breathed. Before she could reply, another volley of gunfire forced them apart. Nara slid down the ridge in a shower of dust, landing beside them. "That was the last of the ridge shooters," she said, reloading her rifle. Royce ran deeper into the canyon, and he's heading back to Silas. Hayes approached, wiping blood from a scrape on his cheek. "Then we follow." Alara's pulse raced. "Into the canyon? After they tried to kill us?" Hayes held her gaze. "If Royce reaches Silas before we do, he'll have time to dig deep and vanish. Then this whole ride is for nothing." Rhett stood, offering Alara his hand. She took it, her fingers trembling, smoke still burning her lungs. He pulled her up gently. "You did good," he murmured. She shook her head. "I didn't want to kill him." "You didn't," he said. "You stopped him." Something inside her shifted, something heavy, painful, but resolute. Hayes helped the deputies remount. Mateo retrieved the stray horses, though his hands shook with leftover fear. When they were all together again, Nara led the way deeper into Chasm Ridge. The canyon felt tighter now, the air heavier. The trail sloped downward, narrowing into a winding corridor of stone. Rhett rode beside Alara. "You holdin' up?" "I think so," she whispered. "But what if Silas knows we're coming?" He met her eyes steady, determined. "Then we finish this on our feet." She nodded. Nara raised her voice from the front. "Tracks lead straight into a box canyon." Royce went running like a scared rabbit. Hayes tightened his grip on the reins. "Silas is close. I can feel it." Alara felt it to a faint vibration in the ground, as if the canyon itself waited, holding its breath. She looked at Rhett. "We're walking right into his den." Rhett's reply was steady as stone. "And we're not walking out until this ends." Then Nara reined in suddenly. "Camp ahead," she whispered. They crested a small rise. Below, hidden by the rock walls, smoke curled from a cluster of tents and fires. Men moved lazily among them. Horses grazed in a corral. A rifle rack stood near the canyon's mouth. Silas Brigham's camp. Alara felt a chill that had nothing to do with wind. Rhett stared hard, jaw clenched, breath shallow. Hayes whispered, "We attack at dawn. Quiet, controlled, no mercy." But Alara was watching Rhett's face, and what she saw there made her own stomach twist. Pain, rage, grief, too many ghosts in one canyon. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "Rhett," she whispered, "whatever's waiting in there, you're not facing it alone." His eyes softened just slightly before he forced himself to look away. Nara crouched, eyes narrowed. "We camp here. No fires, no lamps. We wait." As they settled in the shadows above the outlaw camp, Alara curled close to Rhett, the cold night air brushing their skin. She could feel tension in every line of his body, the coiled readiness of a man preparing for a reckoning years overdue. The canyon below crackled with distant laughter. Silas Brigham's laughter. Alara leaned close, heart in her throat. "I won't let your past take you twice," she whispered, the signature line destined for this chapter. Rhett closed his eyes, breathing her words in like air. Tomorrow, they would storm the canyon. Tomorrow, everything would break, and the dawn creeping over the ridges felt less like light, and more like a countdown. Dawn crept slowly over the sandstone peaks, washing the outlaw camp below in a thin, gray light. Rhett Callahan crouched beside Alara and the others on the ridge, staring down at the cluster of tents, the dying embers of fire pits, the silhouettes of Silas Brigham's men moving through the shadows. Every breath he took tasted like smoke from a past he could never bury. Marshal Hayes whispered, "We hit at first light. Clean and fast." Rhett didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on a single figure emerging from the largest tent, the man whose name had haunted his nightmares for years. Silas Brigham stretched, rolled his shoulders, and turned toward the canyon mouth as if he sensed eyes on him. Alara touched Rhett's arm gently. "Hey, stay with me." He blinked, grounding himself in the warmth of her presence. But when he inhaled again, memories crashed in flames, swallowing his home. His son's small boots by the door. May's ribbon caught in the fence as he ran back too late to save them. Nara crouched beside him. "You start this fight lost in the past, you'll be dead before you hit the ground." Rhett exhaled shakily. Hayes motioned them close. "We'll split. Nara and I take the west ridge. Rhett, you come in with the center push. Mateo covers the flank. Alara stay behind Rhett. You move when he moves." Alara nodded, though fear flickered across her face. Rhett checked his gun, jaw tight. "He won't get away this time. Make sure you don't lose yourself in the doing," Hayes warned. But Rhett barely heard him. He kept seeing Silas's silhouette surrounded by smoke. Alara placed her hand over his. "Whatever happens, you're not that broken man anymore." He didn't believe her, not fully, but the tremor in his chest eased. As they prepared to move, Nara stopped Rhett with a low voice. "You think justice and revenge wear different faces, but out here, they wear the same boots. The only difference is whose blood you're willing to live with afterward." He froze at her words. They carved something painful and necessary into him. Then Hayes gave the signal. Riders tightened their grips. Guns clicked. Hearts steadied. And as the first true light of morning spilled into the canyon, Rhett rose with the others, ready to face Silas Brigham, ready to end what had started years ago. Tomorrow's chapter would begin with gunfire. Gunfire shattered the morning stillness the moment Marshal Hayes gave the signal. Rhett charged down the rocky slope with the others, boots pounding dirt, the crack of rifles echoing wildly through the box canyon. Outlaws spilled from their tents in panic, some half-dressed, others scrambling for guns, shouting warnings that came too late. Nara took the ridge, firing with calm precision. Hayes pushed the center line, deputies flanking him as they cut through the camp. Mateo stayed low, dragging a wounded deputy into cover when a bullet grazed the man's shoulder. Alara stayed on Rhett's heels, just as she'd promised. Her heart raced, but her grip on her gun was steady. Rhett fought with terrifying purpose. Every movement was practiced, controlled, no wasted steps, no hesitation. He disarmed one man with a blow to the jaw, took down another who charged with a knife, and shoved Alara behind a stack of crates when bullets raked across the canyon floor. "Stay behind me," he barked. "I'm not leaving you." She shouted back. Smoke thickened as tents caught fire. Horses shrieked and bolted, adding chaos to the battlefield. An outlaw lunged at Alara. She fired, grazing his shoulder, giving Rhett the opening to finish him with a clean strike. "Good," Rhett said breathlessly. "You're doing good." But the words barely left his mouth before the world shifted. Silas Brigham stepped from behind the largest tent, rifle raised. A cruel grin carved across his scarred jaw. "Callahan," he drawled. "Been a long time." Rhett froze. The past hit him like a fist. Images slammed into him: his burning home, Anna's cries, his son's small hand slipping from his grasp. He staggered for half a second, just long enough for Silas to fire. The bullet grazed Rhett's arm, spinning him sideways. "Rhett!" Alara screamed. He hit the dirt, rolled, and returned fire, hitting Silas's shoulder. Silas ducked behind a boulder, laughing even as blood soaked his shirt. Alara scrambled toward Rhett, but he thrust out a hand. "Stay back, no," she cried, crawling to him anyway. He clenched his teeth, eyes locked on the boulder where Silas hid. "This ends now," Hayes shouted orders somewhere behind them. But the world had narrowed to the two men staring each other down across the broken canyon. Silas stood again, gun raised. "Your family begged louder than you did." Rhett surged forward with a roar, slamming into Silas, the two crashed hard into the rocky wall. Fists flying, guns knocked away. Dust and fury swirled as they grappled, years of hatred spilling out in every strike. Silas grabbed a shard of broken wood and raised it. Alara's scream tore through the canyon. "Rhett!" He twisted, barely dodging the blow, and drove his elbow into Silas's ribs. The outlaw staggered, stunned, and Rhett leveled his gun at him, breathing hard, eyes wild. His finger tightened on the trigger, and then Alara's voice, shaking but sure, cut through the madness. "If you kill him like this, he doesn't just burn your past, he takes your soul with him." Rhett's breath faltered. Silas sneered. "Listen to the girl, Callahan." Rhett's hand trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of choice. A long, terrible moment passed. Then he lowered the gun. Hayes moved in fast, clapping irons onto Silas's wrists. The outlaw spat blood and curses, but he didn't fight. Not now. Not after Rhett chose something stronger than revenge. Alara knelt beside Rhett, hands shaking as she checked his wound. "Are you all right?" He exhaled shakily. "I am now." Round them, gunfire faded. Nara called out that the canyon was clear. Mateo helped the deputies to their feet. Smoke drifted upward, carrying Silas's reign of terror with it. Rhett looked at Alara, really looked, and something inside him finally unknotted. Silas Brigham was defeated, but the reckoning wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring judgment, and a life that waited on the other side of it. The ride back to Red Ridge was quiet in a way that felt almost unreal. The kind of quiet that comes only after something violent has broken open and finally stopped. The canyon behind them still smoked. Silas Brigham rode shackled between two deputies, cursing under his breath, but the sound barely touched Rhett anymore. For the first time in years, the weight on his shoulders wasn't growing heavier. It was lifting. Alara kept close beside him, her horse matching his pace. Every so often she glanced at him, checking his wound, checking his breathing, checking his eyes. He didn't miss any of it. Her presence steadied him more than she knew. Nara rode up alongside them with a half-exhausted grin. "Well," she said, "that was a hell of a way to start the morning." Mateo laughed breathlessly behind her. "And a hell of a mess to clean up." Alara's smile was small but real. "We survived," Rhett nodded, staring ahead at the rising silhouette of Red Ridge. "We did." but he felt her eyes linger on him, questioning, uncertain. She finally spoke. "You didn't pull the trigger," he exhaled slowly. "I wanted to. God knows I did. Why didn't you?" He turned toward her, something raw but peaceful in his voice. "Because revenge wasn't gonna give my family back, and it sure as hell wasn't gonna build the life I want now." Alara's breath caught, her grip tightening on the reins. The others rode ahead, giving them space without saying a word. Rhett continued quietly, "I thought killing him would free me. But standing there, I realized freedom wasn't taking a life. It was letting go of one I'd already lost." Her eyes shone not with pity, but with understanding. "You didn't lose everything, Rhett," she whispered. "You just stopped believing you deserved more." He felt the truth of it settle in his bones. As they reached the outskirts of town, Hayes dismounted and handed Silas off to waiting deputies. "Trial's tomorrow," he said. "Thick evidence, multiple witnesses. He's not walking free again." Silas spat at the ground. "This ain't over, Callahan." Rhett barely looked at him. "For me, it is," Silas shouted, but his voice faded as he was dragged toward the jailhouse. The iron door slammed shut, echoing finality across the square. Alara stepped beside Rhett, her hand brushing his. "So what now?" The question hit him harder than any bullet. What now? He looked out toward the horizon, the basin stretching wide and wild, the land scarred but still waiting for something to grow. Then he looked at Alara, her eyes, her strength, her stubbornness, her fire. "Now," he said softly, "I start living again." She smiled, small and trembling and full of something he thought he'd never feel again. "And where does that start?" He took her hand fully this time, entwining their fingers. "Wherever you are," she exhaled, relief melting into something warm and undeniable. Behind them, Nara hollered, "About damn time." Mateo whooped. Hayes smirked under his mustache, but Rhett didn't care. Not anymore. Alara squeezed his hand, eyes shining. "Then let's go home, Rhett." And for the first time since the night his world burned, Rhett Callahan felt a future break open before him, not bleak, not haunted, but bright. A future that began with her, and together they rode toward it.